Bonsoir à toutes et à toutes.
Good evening, everyone. For the people already present on Zoom, we will start soon. Just waiting to be live on Facebook. And that's it. We can start. So thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar tonight. This is a session co-organized with the Tricontinental Centre, CETRI, which is an important occasion to mention a country where the social, political, economical situation is deteriorating each day even more. A small detail when it comes to this webinar, at the bottom of your screen, right part of your screen, you have a little icon. This is a globe. It's written interpretation, so you have the ability to receive interpretation. If you click on it, you can choose the language you decide, or you would like to hear this translation into French or into English. And then if you want to ask questions, we have a questions and answers icon. So do not hesitate. We will answer your questions. So as I said, this is today the occasion to start a debate between the civil society, Haitian civil society members, the representatives of the EU and of the civil society, European civil society, who are attending tonight to organize this webinar. We've had many exchanges with NGOs, members of the civil society. Some of them are attending tonight. You have to know that for this webinar, we have 3 speakers and we are facilitating with Frederic, and it is difficult to incorporate many more people. You know, it would be extremely tricky in terms of management of this webinar. So I would like to thank anyway the people who wanted to attend to facilitate, but who could not. For instance, the Peace Forum, Haitian Peace Forum Peace Forum for Development, and other NGOs who are attending tonight. So in a nutshell, I will introduce myself. I'm Caroline Roose. I'm a MEP, elected member in the Development Commission at the European Parliament, and it's been a few months that I'm working on the situation in Haiti. So a little reminder, and I'm not looking to represent here my official position at the EU, but here I'm exposing my personal position as an elected member of the Greens. So I would like to say something specifically for people watching us. After the Stop Silence Haiti campaign, the European Parliament has adopted in May 2021 an emergency resolution on the political, social, humanitarian situation in Haiti, for which I have been a negotiator for my political group. So after this Stop Silence campaign, we faced several events which led the country to fall into chaos after the murder of the Haitian President Jovenel Moïse. It was on the 7th of July 2021. The country is now in the hands of armed gangs. And we see that 1 month after that, it was in August 2021, an earthquake devastated the south of the country, killed thousands of people. This catastrophe once more shed light to the extreme vulnerability of this country. Indeed, the Haitian population is suffering from political instability of the country, also facing access issues when it comes to social basic services. We have corruption, governmental incompetency, bad management of the health crisis, people being kidnapped, violence due to gangs, food insecurity. This is really preoccupying. And since the murder of Jovenel Moïse in July, as I said, we have a government operating without democratic legitimacy, and therefore the transition question is being asked. So in August, to do a little summary, you know, to give you major steps of what happened. In fact, in August, there was an agreement for the exit of a crisis. It's called the Montana Agreement. This agreement has been found between different organizations and social sectors of the Haitian civil society, also the international community, remain silent for years when it comes to this worrying situation. We've called upon the EU to go further to the resolution that was adopted in May, and the following months we've required to be able to exchange even more with the with Haiti at the European Parliament, but the framework of the debate we're doing on the situation remained only humanitarian and has never dealt with the transition question. And as I said earlier, we're working on that resolution, and this is my work to do that at the European Parliament. Therefore, I've been regularly in touch, contacting the Haitian civil society, and I would like here to recognize their great, enormous courage, because it's been years that they're requiring transition after the break. And tonight we are lucky and pleased to receive 3 speakers from the Haitian civil society. First, we have Rosie Auguste Ducena. She's a member of the National Network of Defense of Human Rights. Also, we have Magali Moreau-Denis, so member of the Bureau of Follow-up when it comes to the Mountain Agreement, coordinator of the Commission for Research. Also, we will have Velina Charlier, member of the anti-corruption organization New Pape Domi. And tonight we have with us Sylvie Tabès. She's a head of the delegation of European Union in Haiti. And first of all, I would like to thank you all for attending tonight's webinar. At the beginning, this webinar should have been organized very differently. We wished to have a real debate between all stakeholders and the civil society, but unfortunately, Sylvie Tabès will have to leave us for the second part of this discussion. Therefore, she won't be able to answer to questions. I will have the pleasure to co-facilitate this webinar with Frédéric Thomas. He is from the CETRI, as we said, the Tricontinental Centre in Belgium, is a doctor in political science, and I will give him the floor in a couple of minutes. And after that, I will continue my facilitation of this webinar. So Frédéric, you have the floor. Yes, good evening. Good evening, Caroline Roose. Good evening, everyone. As Caroline reminded us, this webinar is really included in the continuity when it comes to mobilization for the civil society, the European civil society, also mobilization of the European Parliament. We're trying to echo with the different actions of stakeholders. So this is a specificity here with our webinar. We wanted it to focus on the Haitian society to try look for possible solutions, and we wanted to do it along with the different stakeholders, European one, international ones at the European Parliament, also within the civil society, because they are also represented by our MEP, Caroline Roose, and the CETRI, which is an NGO specializing in the North-South relationship. It's based in Louvain in Belgium. And you see, with this dual angle, looking at civil society, European civil society actors, and the European Parliament, we want to interrogate, to ask the European Union when it comes to Haiti. So you've noticed we are organizing this webinar on the 8th of February, the day after the 7th of February. This is usually the date which has been retained when it comes to powers after the Duvalier dictatorship. Unfortunately, the international community has let this date pass without noticing it, as they did with the 13th of November, which is the reminder of the massacre of La Saline. So when with Caroline Roose, we didn't want to let this specific date go by without notifying it, without remembering it. So now I give the floor back to Caroline. Thank you very much, Frédéric. Now I would like to give the floor to Sylvie Tabès for a presentation of relationship between the EU and Haiti, as well as the work that has been done with and for Haiti to get a better view after the resolution from 20 May 2021. As I said in my introduction, the European Parliament has underlined the importance of an harmonized, coordinated international action to support the Haitian population. So now I would like to know, how can we ensure today that the transition that will happen, that will occur in Haiti, will really involve the citizens from Haiti? So Mrs. Ambassador, you have the floor for 10 minutes. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, and good evening, Mrs. Roose. You know, all the people who are gathering here tonight, I would like to thank you, first of all, and I also would like to say that I'm grateful that you take into consideration my remarks. I would like to explain that in my intervention, I think I need to remind you of two important principles. The EU in Haiti is represented by a delegation. This is how it works for other countries in the world. And I am the ambassador, the head of that delegation. And I would like to remind you two major aspects of this partnership. First of all, we do not have a partisan approach, which means that we are not biased. We are supporting populations and countries in a partnership decided in agreement with the local stakeholders, looking at main objectives. Our partnerships are not based on a partisan approach. This is very important. Secondly, what is the position of the EU in Haiti? I would say that we are a force of balance, trying to give balance in a very complicated area. And we do believe we can be an added value for this country here and elsewhere as well. But what is the crucial objective of our partnership in Haiti? This is a partnership based on values, the values that built the EU state of right, democracy, human rights. You see, this is our DNA, I would say. So we're developing a partnership with the goal being to be a support in this rule of law as well as values. So supporting the Haitian government in respecting, while still respecting everyone's values, aiming at a better future for everyone. So we want to support in this partnership the citizens in the implementation, effective implementation of needed actions in order to get there, to get this successful transition. We want to support Haitians, helping them to define their path, helping them implementing the changes. I believe it was important to remind you of that. You asked me what is my analysis of the situation. I believe that here we really do have participants who know the situation very well, therefore I will be extremely brief. We have a multidimensional crisis here of a great intensity, and it is sustainable, apparently. Indeed, we are really preoccupied. We've mentioned it already. We are worried when it comes to the continuous degradation of the situation. And it's been worse since the assassination of the president, of course, but the situation was starting to be bad even before that. So this is a lasting crisis which has reached a preoccupying intensity for most of the observers, I would say. And you've mentioned it. We see growing insecurity, violations of human rights, social and economic indicators which are dropping, and it's been a few years now. So it has worsened at different levels. And we are in this moment when Haiti is facing an institutional and constitutional crisis with a side of growing insecurity. And this is really preoccupying. And I will repeat the message that we've repeated for many months. And I believe that, in fact, there is a consensus on that in the country, which is to overcome this crisis, to exit from this deadlock. We need Haitians to agree on an exit of the crisis solution. Therefore, we are encouraging, and I would like to repeat it again. We want to encourage all citizens from Haiti to commit, to really commit into trying to find an Haitian solution to define an exit of the crisis. You see, this is in fact the only option for return to a certain institutional normal state, also to favor, to foster return to safety. So finally, citizens of Haiti can deal with urgent questions such as economic or social questions. One more word. I would talk about the most recent aspect, something we've observed. I need to say that objectively, the government's action has allowed specific steps forward. What can we do? We can just encourage all stakeholders to contribute to these efforts. And we see that approaching this symbolic date, the 7th of February, we've observed specific declarations coming from actors of the civil society, politicians present in Haiti, numerous declarations. And I believe that in the end, everyone agrees on saying we do need a wide consensus. This is true. And I have to say that the European Union will observe with great interest if outside or a part of this principle declaration that we've heard many times and they've been repeated, they will observe if there will then be practical actions that will finally lead to a wide consensus. After this declaration, without a consensus, indeed, the country may remain in that deadlock situation. And honestly, as a member of the European Union, we are preoccupied. The European Union is preoccupied because it has not faced concrete solutions yet. On the contrary, we can see intransigence, you see, when it comes to trying to find solutions. And this is a shame, of course. So sincerely, I would like to repeat what we've said several times, many times, and what many say. The hour is serious, really. Citizens of Haiti have a result obligation. They have to overcome their differences in order to be able to deal together with common interest issues, to exit from that situation. Citizens themselves have the solution if they do wish for it, really. It is not the time anymore of great principle declaration. Now is the time to gather, to meet together, to really discuss together about an exit strategy of this crisis to deal with urgent matters. I reiterate this call on everyone, on the citizens, and I thank you, Mrs. Roose, for allowing me to express the EU's position. And as I said, I do not wish to participate to this debate because we don't have a participative approach. But I thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you very much for your intervention. So as you told me, and you've said it, you will leave the room.
Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Now, I would like to give the floor to Frédéric Thomas, who will introduce the three Haitian speakers. You have the floor. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. We will now switch the second part of the webinar with, we have three speakers, three intellectual and activist figures of the Haitian civil society. We have, unfortunately, Velina Charlier is one of the leaders of the mobilization in 2018 and 2019. She was not able to join us. Unfortunately, we hope she will be able to join us later. I will introduce now the other two guests that we are very fortunate. We have both campaigners and intellectual figures. We have a member of the Senate. It's an institution, a human rights institution recognized in Haiti and on an international level. Rosie Auguste Ducena. We have also Magali Cormot-Denis, who has had an official position as the Ministry for Culture. And in the order of the speech, I don't know if it will be Rosie who starts and then Velina will join us at some point. We thought we will now give the floor to Rosie, and then we hope Velina Charlier can join us. Rosie Auguste Ducena, you have the floor. 2 minutes each, for 10 minutes, sorry. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. So I would like to say good evening to you. Our NDDH, our institution, and the CETRI really would like to thank you for organizing this event. The current situation demands the adoption of immediate measures, and it also requires a change in the approach to the situation in Haiti. After giving unconditional support to the president, now it is siding with the prime minister who is actually for which there are suspicions that he might be involved in the assassination of the president. So the right to life, the right to security are not limited. And there have been journalists, trade unionists, different professionals, different adults and minors. So many people have been assassinated. We have seen the state authorities want to maintain their power. And from 2018 to 2022, there were 15 massacres and attacks by armed gangs, during which about 100 people were assassinated or disappeared, or about tens, lots of women and girls were also raped. There was no inquiries, no legal inquiries that came through and that managed to find the people who were doing these attacks. The country is run since July 2021 by a prime minister who concentrates all of the powers. And because of this, the security situation is constantly deteriorating, as Mrs. Tabes has just said. And there are new armed gangs that are forming as well in the country. the rights are not respected. 82% of the population imprisoned are still waiting for 82% of the prisoners are still waiting for a judgment. In the prisons, the people detained, there is no the health conditions are not met. There is pest. There are lots of diseases such as tuberculosis and different conditions. And there are 11,021 people are maintained in these prisons, detained. One of them had a majority in parliament, so they decided not to organize elections and not to renew the local representatives. And then there was the nomination of intermediary agents in the municipalities. The 21st of September 2021, the Prime Minister sent back the council that was put in place and announced that he wanted to launch some consultation with the mission of also organizing a referendum, a constitutional referendum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to say that the question of elections can only be raised if there is an improvement of the security situation in Haiti. And if there is an audit of this, there is this German company that agreed to approve a contract which was illegal. The social rights are not respected. The health centers, hospitals are not do not exist or are not functioning properly. There was no social assistance program that have been put in place, and even though there have been so many alerts with regards to famine and poverty, there is no governmental program that comes to the assistance of the inhabitants of the population. There is so much unemployment, inflation, cost of living has risen a lot, and there is this constant movement towards the dehumanization of the population. During this examination, this examination was very superficial, and some huge efforts were made, but a president with the head of the bar, the lawyers' bar, and thousands of people, including policemen, were assassinated in the past few years with a great violence. And we see the authorities having a very sloppy attitude, and they don't take into account all the recommendations that have been issued. The Haitians that are trying to escape from this nightmare are tracked, and they are these are adults, these are young people, these also postpartum women and babies are deported from Haiti without proper attention given to each individual, without the respect for international conventions and law. Therefore, we ask the international community and the European authorities to help us. We want to ask the EU member states to respect our claims, because we are exposed and we are constantly the victims of this politics. And we ask the EU delegation to not to support this ballot, this electoral process, which will not lead to um, any political agreement, any good agreement. We ask this delegation to stand away from these leading figures that do not reflect a good vision of the country in terms of respect. I would like to thank you. I remain at your disposal for any questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the content of your intervention and for respecting your speaking time. So I will give the floor to Velina Charlier, who is one of the leaders of the mobilization from 2018. She spearheaded this very strong mobilization, mobilization against corruption. So Velina Charlier, for 10 minutes. So good evening, everyone. I'm sorry if I'm late. That's because of the day we had yesterday, which was a very difficult day, which meant I was blocked outside of Port-au-Prince. And when you are outside Port-au-Prince, you know, the reception is really not good. I'm sorry for being late. I put on my video just so you know who I am, but I will remove the video so you know, the sound is better. Is that okay? So my name is Velina Charlier. I'm one of the founding members of the movement Nous Pap Domi, which means we're watching you. This is a citizen collective.
Madame Velina, est-ce que vous pourriez simplement remettre votre vidéo, sinon on n'aura pas d'interprétation.
Mrs. Velina, could you please switch on your video again? All right. I just can I continue to speak? Sorry, it's because of the poor reception. As I said, the movement is a citizen collective, and we're fighting against corruption, against impunity, and for social justice. So the bulk of the movement came from the desire of the citizens to have a response with regards to the terrible management of the funds. So our movement we have some connection problems. There were some, it stopped, the sound stopped for a while. Can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you more or less. That's better now. I think that's the best solution I found given the circumstances. So our movement started with a person who asked for accounts for information about the Petrocaribe Funds. This was a development fund given by Venezuela to Haiti. It's a preferential agreement with preferential rates over 25 years for the purchase of petroleum products. So this started like this, and it became a big movement which asked for transparency in the management of the states and the end of impunity. So the end of financial crimes, but also the end of crimes and assassinations. And that's how we also join the fight of other organizations that fight for human rights. So to tell you more about the situation in Haiti, we have now a government which continues the same corruption politics, the same mafia-like politics. We have the mafia in power. It's an economic mafia. This is the governance model that is used now, and following the assassination of the president, this is not a coup. The former president was assassinated. It is the same regime with the allies that joined it, that stayed in power, that confirmed their own politics based upon terror. The insecurity we're faced with in Haiti today is hiding a very intense insecurity, and this is what they've chosen. This is the mode of governance, with a complete insecurity in the whole country, with an abduction rate that has gone through the roof, with assassinations, with executions in the open. Because of this terror, the population can barely survive, and it reacts with a lot of difficulties. The country is also cut off, broken into two parts, and you have the southern part and the northern part, and it's very difficult to travel. It's often difficult to travel towards the north, and it is because of this governance model that has been implemented, and with the unconditional support, with the groups of different countries, of diplomacy from different countries, and also with the support of the EU. So the power in place after the earthquake of January 2010, when it was not the right time to conduct elections, but the US, the EU, and tried to force Haitians into organizing very bad elections, and Jovenel Moïse started to become president with a very corrupted government and with a conditional support from the international community, to such a point that foreign embassies, particularly US, American embassies, and American and EU agencies, do not engage in dialogue with the civil society in Haiti. This is an attitude whereby we're not listened to. We have just to obey our superiors. These are just very bad meetings. This is just mock meetings, fake meetings. This is nearly a neo-colonial way of being totally immersing into the politics and interfering with the politics. And within the scope of the investigation in the assassination of the former president, Jovenel Moïse, the judge that was looking at this investigation was actually let go, and is no longer employed. And now there is a connection between the prime minister and one of the main suspects in this assassination. But this first prime minister, this prime minister is still receiving all of the support from the international community, from the EU, from the United States. So these are corrupted people that have the entire impunity. And today we have the president and the prime minister have the full support of the international community. With a tweet, it was a tweet that the US and the EU had written to support these governments, and it is through a tweet that they supported that they support these people in power. And even though Jovenel Moïse was already in an illegitimate mandate, so Haiti today, to tell you very quickly in one sentence, it is a mafia state. It is a state run by mafia groups, and it is both a political mafia and an economic mafia. So the main problem in this country is impunity. So anybody can commit any kind of crime, whether it is a sexual crime, an economic crime, an assassination, a murder, and there's no problem. It's a complete impunity. And there are other ministers that have been quoted when we mention sexual scandals, but each time they put pressure, and the justice system is totally under the grip of the political power. So this situation is maintained, and the international community continues to support a mafia state, and this is the main cause and of the fact that Haiti gives the image of a state that has failed, but this is not the case. There is a group of courageous citizens that are trying to find some solutions. But all political groups, political parties, the organizations of civil society are bought. There is a group of citizens that are entirely honest and that have conducted this dialogue for over 1 year to reach the Montana Agreement. And we have asked the people in power, the authorities in power, to join this Montana Agreement, so that we can organize elections with a calm climate where people are not afraid of running as candidates, and so that we want to have a real government in place, not just puppets. And this struggle has been totally overlooked by foreign diplomacy, and all of this work brings us hope. It means that with the people who are younger than me, we think we can still stay in Haiti. I'm 41 years old, but a lot of people will tell you that living in Haiti is a choice you make, knowing that you can die any minute, because life expectancy of an Haiti person is just 1 hour renewable time. So we just really hope to find a solution between Haitian to know what is the best for us. So what we're asking, that's what we're asking to the international community, to the European Union, to the United States of America. We want them to respect Haitian sovereignty and our fight for democracy, the fight for democracy we've led for decades, to stop protecting the corrupt politicians in power, and to stop looking at their own interests, to look at the interests of the Haiti populations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Velina, for your intervention. That gives us a perfect transition towards the next transition, the one of Megali Cormo Denis, who will speak and about the next mobilization.
The Mountain Agreement, for instance. So I will give you the floor, Mrs. Como Denis, for 10 minutes as well. Yes. Good evening, good afternoon, honorable MEPs, Caroline Roose, other panelists, my comrades. Thank you for the CETRI for co-organizing this event, this conversation. So I would have left such as the wind turns to high seas, to foam, which is far away. I would have left on tiptoes without making any noise, to not stop listening, hearing your laughters. I would have left without you hearing the tears. I would have left, and that's it. This is the last prestige to choose. The last prestige to choose my battle, my fight. I have the supreme possibility to hear my laughter, the laughter of my penultimate blackbird laughter, the laughter of the scrap metal. I have the choice of the struggle. This is a sacred right. I had to make choice. This is the only issue. So I wanted to, with this poem, I wanted to give homage to our famous, amazing novelist, poet, medical man, which is someone who fought for the less privileged, Jacques Stéphanalix. And in this year, 2022, this is the 100 year after his birth. I've read some excerpt from his poem, which is The Last Message. He was resisting to dictature. He was 39 years old when he's been savagely murdered by Duvalier. So yesterday was 7th of February. It should have been a day of celebration of the break of the 7th of February 1986, with 30 years of bloody regime, you know, dictatorship, absolutism. And it was the Duvalier father and sons years. It was a formidable popular revolt of the people, and it looked at the repressive militia of the torturers and Western powers, which helped him to remain in power thanks to deadly climate. So our faith in democracy helped us be to succeed. And yesterday, on the 7th of February, it was the constitutional date. And this is when the government has been invested, a government coming from votes. And we are still here today talking about transition because we've been constrained by the PHTK regime after 11 years of their three versions, the Martelly, Jovenel Moïse, and today Ariel Henry has never organized one election at any level. In our municipalities, it's been 2 years now that we have mayors which have been appointed by a presidential order. We don't have deputy chambers anymore. The Senate has been reduced to 1/3 of its members. The Court of Cassation has been deprived of 3 judges out of 9, and then there will just be only 3 members remaining in 1 week. And the judicial power is teetering, if you want, and the mandate, it is a mandate of almost 70% of the judges of the Haitian judges has expired. So after the assassination of Mr. Moïse, nothing has been made 7 months after this crime. No institutions have been able to do their job properly today. The country has fallen down in this more deeper in this constitutional, institutional, social, economic crisis. The corruption is general. There is impunity. There are mafia groups which are dealing everything in charge of damaging people, goods, etc. So the crime is everywhere. The police forces are not doing anything. We are facing distress everywhere. 5 million of people who are struggling. The desire to live is what moves us, and we're still unfortunately under an international help. We are under international care and protection. So we are numerous, we are in despair, and we want to stop with this multi-form forces, and therefore the Haitian society has awakened and has decided to assume its citizens' responsibility. Therefore, these resolutions of this forum have created the desire to find solutions. And we are representing farmers' organizations. Some of them are been existing for decades. Also trade unions, organizations to protect human rights. In the National Network of Protecting Human Rights, we have the Episcopal from the Catholic Church organization as well, and hundreds of parish of Haiti organizations of protection of rights of women, artists, anti-corruption collective, religious associations, Protestants, from the Episcopal as well. The diaspora organizations as well. So this commission, after 7 months of dialogues, consultations, after and with social groups, social representatives, this commission has reached an agreement the 30th of August 2021, the Mountain Agreement, gathering thousands of signatures of political groups, managers and heads of people's organizations, social, professional organizations, etc., etc. By the observation of the lack of institutional, provisional disposition, it has not been able to answer to the state crisis. You see, we need to try to find an agreement for the society. I'm sorry, the speaker is speaking really fast. I don't have the speech, so I don't have all the details. So this is the exercise of our right to self-determination, to the conquest of our political sovereignty in the expectation of general elections. We will need to appoint appropriate leaders for our country in a consensus. The Montana Agreement has been signed in January. We had a political consensus with the Pen Modifié group, gathering other major political groups and non-signatory of the Montana Agreement people, which is drawing the roadmap towards what has been platform transition included in the Montana Agreement, which is planning a collegial governance for presidents and a prime minister. We are still waiting for the answer of the Prime Minister d'Affaires to our second letter. It's been a few months now. Letter in which we've asked for a meeting so we can resume our work, resume dialogue with the power in place and people who signed the 11th of September agreement. So these multiple organizations have elected or designated, appointed their 44 delegates in a National Transition Council. This is a body which has been planned in the agreement, and on the 30th of January, last 13th of January, by a second-degree election transmitted live by several Haitian media, they've decided, and also via Zoom, they have decided to appoint a president, which we will join. I am sorry, they will join the government, also appointing Stephen Benoit as a prime minister. I'm sorry, connection is bad. We've lost the speaker. And with all players of the Montana Agreement, we are continuing relentlessly consultations with the people in order to reach national consensus in which different players, international players, will try, or are in a way believing this is major consensus, but this is not. We need something partial, transparent. This transition government will need to be consensual, will have the ability to reconcile the nation with itself, to create conditions to free the 70% of the voters who've been kidnapped in a way by armed groups. You see, this along with political forces is needed. And yesterday, in his speech on this really symbolic date, the Prime Minister had a speech reminding us of darker days. He qualified all these efforts as distractions. You see, Timon Capjoy Acte, translated children playing with sand, with kids, just playing. So therefore, it is important that the international community remains inflexible. I mean, it is important that the international community sees that this government is inflexible and not willing to change, not willing to do a positive transition. Therefore, we are reiterating our call to the solidarity, necessary solidarity. And we are calling upon help to stop this regime which is imposing things on the citizens. At each moment, the situation is worsening. It's been 4 days that we are facing the absolute horror. More than 10 assassinations have been done, and for instance, the one of a young teenager, female teenager, also raids of armed people in specific neighborhoods, several neighborhoods of this capital, and also the emotion of the population this morning on watching on CNN, you know, this American TV channel, which talked about terrible events. So Mrs. Tabes started the dialogue, but she left this dialogue. She feels the debate with the representatives from civil society that we are representing today here is a proof of being partisan. And she herself reminded the degradation, continuous degradation of the situation in Haiti. And in the same time, this is paradoxical, she did not feel necessary to stay, and she is the representative of the international community. You see, this is the way, the best way to show proof of being a partisan, you see. And I thank you very much. I remain available for your questions. So it was a partisanship. Thank you very much, Mrs. Komodeni. Thank you to you all for all your interventions. Thank you, because thank you, because you are you just named obstacles, difficulties, and from now on, I will give the floor back to facilitate now debates, exchanges with the public.
Thank you, Frederic. And thank you to all the speakers for these explanations about the situation in Haiti. I have a number of questions that have occurred, that have been asked in the chat. We have seen a certain number of questions. What we suggest is that we are going to give you the questions. And I have a question from Roger Petitfrère. I have a question from Roger Petitfrère. So for all the three speakers and yourself, Frédéric, if you want, do you think that in order to have a broad consensus, is the EU waiting to have a 100% agreement of the Haitian people within and outside of Haiti? I don't know if Magali, Rosie, or Velina, or Frédéric, you want to speak about this. You have the floor. You can switch on your mic. Yes. In fact, it's a question which is for the EU. What do you feel? Yes, I know this is a question which is for the EU. Unfortunately, the webinar is different from what we had planned. With regards to the questions that are for the EU, I will then list these questions and I will send the list of questions to the EU so that we can see whether we can have some responses. What I can ask you is to give your feeling about this type of questions, first of all. Right, thank you very much, Mrs. Roose. I wanted to say that an article had planned a negotiation process within the agreement, the framework of the agreement. It means that we knew that even though we had gathered a certain number of partners, a great number of partners, given the division of society, given the violence that is there, we have to discuss with other stakeholders and negotiate in order to reach a political peace that will enable us to create the conditions to start a new direction in the government practices in Haiti. Therefore, this request of a national consensus, which the international community is reaffirming, is just the fact of trying to recover, to retrieve what we have done, all of our efforts, the efforts we've put, without even recognizing that it is us, within the framework of this agreement, who have initiated this process. So it is a way to negate, to deny our efforts, and to try to take ownership of what we said, our discourse, without recognizing that it is our discourse and thinking. Right. If I just wanted to add to what Mrs. Komodeni said, just the fact that since 2018, we've tried to draw the attention of the international community on this, and we have to remember that when we met with representatives, political representatives, we saw there was the fear of the unknown. And every time we were asked, if you want to create elections, to have a transition, who should be part of this transition? Who do you see should be part of this transition? But today, there is this mechanism that was put in place through the Montana Agreement, so that us in civil society, we don't want to go towards chaos, of course, but we want to free ourselves from the international community. So together, Haitian people need to think about this when we reach a good agreement between Haitian people, because at the time the EU and the international community thought it was impossible to reach this agreement. And now that we have this possibility to engage this dynamic, this mechanism, now that we can respond to the claims of the Haitian population, we see this roadblock, this obstacle. Yes, I would like to add something else. I also want to say that this constant request for a national consensus is not just an attitude of that despises all of the efforts that were made. The fact of trying to find a solution, a Haitian solution to the crisis, is this request actually is hypocritical, because the dialogue has been going on for over a year, but it is also an attitude of disregard and contempt. And it is really an attitude which is deeply based in the model of governance we have in Haiti. This is a process for Haitian people, but led without the Haitian people. So there is this process of boycott of this consensus that could be broader. Maybe other people will want to join the consensus, but the consensus had been found, an agreement was signed. So this consensus was achieved without their diktats, without their influence. And I think this is what they cannot accept. This is the real problem. A consensus was already found. Thank you very much to the three of you for your answers. We have many different questions, so we will try to give responses that are a little bit short, if that's okay. We have questions for which we, and with regards to the questions which we cannot respond, to which we cannot respond to tonight, I will respond to them later. I commit to this. How can the government work with a representative of the European Union? Well, earlier, if in May 2021, we had signed an emergency resolution on the situation, the humanitarian political situation in Haiti. I was negotiating also this emergency resolution. So we've been working on the topic of Haiti, on the subject of Haiti for many months to look at the cause of the crisis. And then we had the international campaign Stop Silence Haiti, in which I got involved as well. So I'm trying in the development committee, I have made several interventions about the situation in Haiti. I alert the commission during the last development committee. There were the elections. We were talking about the appropriate time in order to hold elections. And in my intervention, I was saying that we cannot propose elections today because I think this is not democratic with regards to the political situation in the country. I have noted this point and I will continue to throw light on this. With regards to the Montana agreement, we talked about it during the commission, the committee. These are important issues. The Haiti question is not mentioned enough in the development committee, which is why I'm trying to push this subject forward much more, because I committed to signing a resolution, an emergency resolution for Haiti, and in order to respect also fundamental human rights, I will continue to work on this subject so that we do not forget about Haiti. I have another question from Pascal, who says, good evening. According to the panelists, what are the interests of the United States and other countries of the core group in order to maintain the situation in Haiti? Yes, Magali, do you want to say something about this question, or somebody else, Velina? Or yes, Rosie or Velina, if you want to respond to this question. Maybe we cannot really say what are the interests of such a member of the international community to maintain a situation of crisis in Haiti. But the international community is indeed maintaining the situation as it is. When you meet with other members of the international community on the European side, sometimes they tell you that the United States and other states, other American states, seem to be much more interested, seem to want to have a control over the situation and lead the situation. But what exactly is hiding in terms of interests? The fact that there is a violation of human rights, etc. Yes, thank you very much, Rosie. I have a question for Frédéric. This is a question from Wilso Louis that is echoing the previous question. Why this choice of the EU to talk about the humanitarian situation in Haiti, even though the situation is deeply political, is really political? Yes, very briefly, because if you talk about the humanitarian situation, there is a consensus on that. And you know, this is a way to say you're doing something, you know, humanitarian aid. There was a meeting in Canada today about security and safety in Haiti, and France proposed to reinforce the collaboration with the Haitian police So these are the two main ways from the international community to intervene in Haiti without recognizing their responsibility in the current deadlock, without even pushing for a Haitian solution, without recognizing a solution based on popular sovereignty and the political projects that are borne by the Haitian population. Yes, thank you very much, Frédéric. We have a few more questions. I have a question from Baudelaire Julien. How can this webinar organized by a European Member of Parliament influence the position of the EU in this crisis in which the EU has a shared responsibility? I cannot influence the EU position in Haiti, but I wanted to organize this webinar because it is an opportunity to discuss and debate and support the dialogue with Haitian people. The fact of working on this emergency resolution was normal for me to be able to continue to work on the Haiti subject, because in the EU Parliament we have different visions. My political group is used to listening to the claims of civil society, and which is why I wanted to organize this discussion and debate this evening and to organize this webinar. This is a very important subject and we don't discuss it very much in Brussels. So this is a way also to bring our support and to be able to explain the situation in the field. I hope I answered your question. Now we also have a question from Rolf Papillon. So in the last period of his mandate, Mr. Aristide had lost the support of the EU, which only funded some civil society projects. Well, the question is gone, sorry. So the EU had based its decision on the links with the gangs and the violations of democracy. Do you not think that this is now the case as well? And could the representatives of the different movements ask for the same thing? Do you want to respond to this question? Well, yes. We need to, first of all, say that the situation we have in Haiti today is kind of an explosive situation. And this has always been a problem for us. We also need to underline the fact that there was a time when if you avoided some dangerous areas, you were relatively safe. You were feeling quite safe. But now, today, we're in a very explosive situation. And we think that this safety situation that is paralyzing, that is the Haitian citizens and all of the activities that are taking place in Haiti could be a condition in order to demand for an intervention. But I see there is another question. We want a partnership, because we know that Haiti cannot get by itself. But we don't want to have this relationship with leaders and people who just obey and are submitted to the leaders. We want the international community to know that we are a sovereign people. That's what I want to say. Thank you very much, Rosie. I have another question for the speakers. I don't know who this question is from. Why would there be a presidential committee of 5 members? This is some sort of government committee, government council, and Haiti often called upon this in situations of crisis, and which enabled us to find a consensus that covers, that is open towards the main institutions of civil society. We are discussing with different institutions, with the university, etc. This is also an opportunity to avoid that in this transition period, we do not move towards a real presidential regime embodied in one single man or one single woman, and to give an opportunity, to give the possibility to these different institutions that are members of this council, that would be coordinated by a member that would act as a president for the transition, assisted by 4 other members, to find a balance between the political forces and the civil society forces in order to avoid having the elections organized in the interest of a particular group or a particular political party. Thank you very much, Magali. So now it is nearly 8 o'clock. We were supposed to finish at 8 o'clock. We still have a lot of questions. What I suggest is that we stay another 10 minutes to take another few questions. I would love to continue the discussion even further, but if we could stay maybe another 10 minutes and take a few more questions and then have a summary done by Frédéric in a conclusion, would that be okay for you? Yes, that's great. I have another question. So civil society does not want an intervention from abroad. What sort of support does it want from other countries? If Magali or Velina, you want to answer this question? No, go ahead. I wanted to say that Rosie mentioned this earlier in her response. We want a partnership, we want a collaboration, and we want Haitian sovereignty to be respected, which is not based upon diktats, but which really listens to the real needs of Haitian people, which really listens to the desires and the needs of civil society and also the people in government or the future government, I mean. And this is a relationship that is not a relation between leaders and people who are submitted to leaders. And we know that very well. The diplomacy in third world countries, they're always there to defend their own interests. And sometimes their interests are actually run counter to the interests of the local populations. So, for example, in Haiti, the international community is closing its eyes on corruption issues because, you know, now Haiti is the third main buyer of rice of Florida. So this is not a balanced situation, a balanced relationship. These are relationships based on exploitation, where all the excess that it needs to be sold is sold to Haiti, and even if it is detrimental to the local production, as we see it is the case for rice. So we really want to have a respect for the sovereignty of Haitians, the sovereignty and recognition that Haiti is a free, independent and sovereign country that is able to determine its own fate, its own future. Thank you very much, Velina. I have a question And I must say that I think I have the answer to this question. So I have a question from Marcel Katzberg, who would like to know how the speakers find the deep motivation to continue their fight in these very difficult conditions. I know you have I know you have all of this in your hearts, and it's your heart that speaks, but you have the floor. Thank you, Mrs. Roose.
Thank you, Mrs. Roose, and I believe you've answered the question yourself. It's coming from our faith in the democracy, our determination to fight for our territory. It's coming from our deep convictions, the conviction that us all in Haiti, we do deserve to live as human beings, that this majority which is suffering can find comfort, better living conditions. And this motivation is also coming from our love for our country, beautiful country, our culture, our history, our historical resistance. This is what built our identity. Thank you very much, Magali. There is one question to me. Dear Mrs. Roose, what is the position of the EU when it comes to this Montana agreement? So the official EU position is aligned with what Mrs. Taves said in the introduction. You have to know that within the European Union, there are numerous states, ministries, also elected members, us MEPs. We do sit by political group. We've asked the EU to take some distance with Jovenel Moïse and the government and the Haitian governments, and also to stand with the bodies, institutions who are requiring better protection for the citizens. So what I suggest, because we still have many questions, so maybe we can keep questions, and maybe you can send us the questions via email. You can send them again via email, and then we can answer to them. Yes, Magali, I see one question there's one question which says, and I would like to answer, which says, what we're looking for is not more democratic, and to get a really democratic regime, we need elections. And I believe that this is an important question, because of course, we're talking about legitimacy based on the society. We're not talking about national legitimacy. This is what we will only get from general elections, you see, on the territory. But what I would like to really underline and answer to that person is there are no answers to this current situation included in the constitution. Institutions have collapsed. There is no constitutional answer or neither institutional answer. And when the law is voiceless, then we need society to find itself ways to answer to the crisis. And this is what gave birth to this initiative, this commission, to try to find a solution for the crisis, trying to get a society agreement, a society based on a consensus, in order to have leaders which can be trusted, who can be trusted, allowing population to actively participate to general elections, to get this national legitimacy. Please let me rapidly remind that we do we do have this, let's say, international shame when it comes to elections. We went from about 75% of participation to less than 18%. You see, we need to change that. We need to create conditions in favor of a change. If we do agree to go to elections in these current conditions, therefore we will have elections which won't open to a stability period to create trust for investors. Instead, we will go down deeper into crisis instability, such as what was done during the last elections. There were sources of instability. Thank you. Thank you very much, Magali, for answering that question, which is a nice conclusion, I would say. What I suggest is for the remaining questions, which have not been answered yet, Lois will send my email address in the chat and I will send you all the appropriate questions, the questions you can answer. What I suggest is now we give the floor to Frédéric. So he will do a summary, then I will briefly take back the floor to do the conclusion. Frédéric, yes, thank you very much. This is not an easy task to try and summarize all these quality interventions, the 3 interventions we had, Rosie Auguste du Sénat, Magali Comodoni, and Vélina Charlier. So first, they shared with us an overview of the current Haitian situation when it comes to rights, social rights, economic situation, social situation. This is a country where there are daily degradations since 2018, but even more after the assassination of Mr. Moïse. So it is a country cut in half, in which accessing north from south is complicated by the army, which is spread everywhere. And also, there's been a dynamic analysis showing that this situation is in the PHTK regime, so since 2011, at least. So this is the continuity of the same regime, which is renewed. You see the same policy, or same policies without real elections. This is also what explains the state deterioration states of all the public institutions, with a denial policy of the state, you see, so it's full of delinquents, corruption, almost a mafia government, also explaining that there's no fatality, no accident. We are just facing a political choice. And Mrs. Charlier mentioned a governance mode. So this is here an oligarchy in which armed groups and terror is used to impose power. And this is how it ensures its legitimacy. And this is really hopeless. But nevertheless, there are some life forces. And you reminded us that the 7th of February is not only, as Mrs. Taves said, a symbolic date, but it is also a date of a popular rebellion, you see, so included into the Haitian population. In the current situation, and all have insisted on that, we find the same ingredient, which is, unfortunately, the interference of the international community. This is visible in the different examples of handling manipulation when it comes to Mrs. Hilly. This is also visible. We can see there is a convergence between the denial policy and the neo-colonialism approach of the international community, you know, with this type of contempt, we can see that. Therefore, the current government, the current state, is continuing this policy with the unconditional support of the international which is playing a role of fake, let's say, fake watchman of democracy in Haiti. We had a dialogue, debates, and we've seen what really happened. And we are calling on to have a broader consensus, copying the Ariel Henry one. This is a consensus we have today. We do have a consensus which is alive, which is dynamic, full of hope. And you reminded us of all that, these important mobilizations. So there's a broad consensus, broad vision, regrouping diverse political parties, but it's not visible at the international level. It's discarded, if you want, you see, because it's not aligned with what the international community would like. So this is a consensus which is going against the will of the international community. In fact, we could bet that there's a vast, large consensus in Haiti, much more important than what could exist at the international level. So what said the three speakers, their demands are all aligned. We want people to be applying a real partnership policy. They want to be, their demands to be listened to. They want to stop with impunity, with the replication on and on of the same system. And of course, there is a series of conditions such as safety, consensus, and credibility of the institutions. And they would need an audit of the person who was in charge of doing ID cards. So for these conditions to be present, we need a transition and a break transition, breaking with the international policy, break with the current policy, which is trapping the Haitian society. So to get this transition, to do it, there are tools. This is what our three speakers presented today. There are paths, there are ways, there's no fatality. There are solutions to exit from this deadlock. But to do that, we need to use the tools, the different spaces available. We need to bet on Haitian sovereignty as well. We need to use determination of the people. And we see that it is alive still, coming from a long history. It is all about sovereignty. And this is where I will end, to go back to Jean-Stéphane Alexis' words, looking at laughter, right, and struggles of the Haitian people. Thank you very much. Thank you, Frédéric. Thank you, Frédéric, yes, for this summary, very thorough summary of the reflections we had today from our three speakers in our webinar tonight. It wasn't really easy, and I wanted to thank the different participants for their attendance, also for the debate, the exchanges we had. I would like to thank all the organizations who helped us, also thanking all the participants, all the people who connected, who were online tonight. And what I would like is that Haiti will not fall into oblivion, you know, if the situation is changing. we wouldn't like the demands of the citizens to be forgotten. And as I said earlier, we have numerous questions which have not been answered yet, but you will have the ability to ask your questions, to send them to me, and we will answer to them, even if today we didn't have the whole debate because we didn't have enough time. And I would like to thank you for your motivation. We see that you're talking from your heart, you see, and please do continue. Do not stop. And also we would like to thank the interpreters for staying with us a bit longer tonight, because yes, we needed to mention all these important questions. And thank you again, once again, and I will continue being with you, supporting you. You have the floor if you want to say one last word. Yes, just I wanted to thank you, thanking you, Caroline Roose, you and your team, the interpreters, the participants for their patience. And it is important to understand that, yes, we are fighting for our rights, despite Mrs. Tabes saying that, yes, this is about respecting principles. No, yes, we do believe in ethics. And thank you very much for supporting us in this struggle for our emancipation. Thank you very much. Yes, just one word. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything. Thank you for having been patient, for listening to us, for offering us this space where we can share together, exchange. Thank you. Well, now with these last words, I wish you a very nice, pleasant evening, and I'm thanking my team who worked hard on that, on the organization. Thank you very much. Enjoy a nice evening.